Resistance is a reaction to unresolved, undesirable emotions, and finding the root cause to those emotions is key. One powerful way to do that is through body mapping. By understanding how our bodies react to these emotions, we can begin to heal and move forward. Welcome to Spiritual Midwife, the podcast that tenderly guides you through the transformative journey of spiritual awakening and personal development towards the ultimate destination of soul sovereignty. I'm Claire Atyeo, a medicine woman and dedicated guide to the profound realm of soul sovereignty, and you are listening to Spiritual Midwife. So how can we eradicate these habits of procrastination and resistance? A great place to start is to start by identifying the root causes, taking note of our actions when we become resistant, taking note of what we do, what we feel, the inner dialogue. What are we doing instead of facing what we need to do? What do we say to ourselves internally? These observations are crucial to learning what still needs healing within us. Let me share some personal examples to illustrate this process. And it does take time. It takes time to be honest with yourself, to build up and be consciously aware of what you're doing. It's very easy to do things on a subconscious level rather than go, why am I doing that? And so please remember, this is a process. It's not something you're going to be able to master in a week or 2 weeks or in a month. There are many, many unresolved emotions within all of us, and this is part of the process. This is part of the soul sovereignty, self-mastery process of growth. So one of my pet hates is domestic work. And I'm from a generation where all the emphasis was still put on the feminines. That was their role. Things have changed now, but it's one of those. So there was a little bit of that feminist in me that was resistant because I was being told that that's what I should do. But what I noticed was, as I started doing the body map, is I started to ask those whys in any given situation. When I was supposed to be doing something and then I would find that I was doing something else, I would just bring that into the conscious mind. I would take a breath, I would take a moment, and I go, okay, what's going on here? I would ask that of myself. I wouldn't be self-deprivating. That is something we innately do, and that is one of the negative habits that we want to break, because we just start a cycle then of negativity. So it's just taking a moment to check in with ourselves. And the first thing that I actually do is, when I get resistance, is I take a breath and I check in with myself and I ask myself, okay, am I resistant to this because there is something that still needs healing? Or am I resistant to this because it's not yet time? I'm, as you know, on my spiritual journey, and so I like to align myself fully to divine timing. So that's the first question I ask. Is this resistance because there is something within me that still needs healing, or is it because it's not yet the right time? Often on the journey we have creative projects on the go, and we get given the information, and if you're like me, you like to run with it, and sometimes spirit will put the brakes on for me. So that's the first question I ask. And then obviously, if it is me, which 9 times out of 10 it is, then I look at what I've actually done on a subconscious level, because you don't catch it straight away. You don't go into resistance, go, oh, I've gone into resistance, instant you've gone into resistance. You would have already started and diverted your attention to something else. what I found was to be observant of what that something else was. And you can start to build up a picture of what your go-tos are, because they will be habitual. So for me, for example, I go to ironing when I'm sad, and I go to scrubbing the oven when I'm angry. And those are just examples. Yours will be different, but you will actually be able, when you start to take the time to make yourself consciously aware of your go-tos in those moments of procrastination and resistance, you will start to then be able to identify the activity and the emotion. And it's interesting because I was in my, well, it was only a few years ago, in fact, that I connected the link between anger and cleaning the kitchen, because in a home there's so many other places I could clean. And I've always had that love-hate relationship with food. I've struggled with weight issues, and I also, in my younger years, I comfort ate. And interestingly enough, I don't comfort eat with sadness. I comfort eat with anger. Take the time. What are you doing? What activity? Where are you diverting your attentions? What emotion are you feeling? When else do you do that? And then make the links from some of your other habits, because this is a chain reaction, and we want to find that anchoring link that has us continue to do these activities and has us blocking ourselves and stopping ourselves from moving forward in a positive, uplifting way. So it's really important to take the time to start mapping yourself, mapping your body, mapping your emotions. And so if I find myself ironing, for example, rather than doing what I'm doing, that's a sadness. I now know that that is a sadness for me. So I'm then able to go in and say, okay, what's going on here? What is it about this particular incident of procrastination, of resistance, that I'm sad about? Then we can find that very often it's because we're undertaking something that is more of an obligation rather than a passion. And there are times, especially when it's obligations, there are times when we are going to need to do it. So how do we push through it? What are the things that we can actually do to help ourselves, assist ourselves through that without causing more trauma, without building more inner dialogue of negativity? And by recognizing these patterns, we can start to address those underlying emotions and beliefs that are driving our resistance. What tension are you feeling in your body, and where are you feeling it? Each of our muscles are attached to one of the meridians. We have the 12 main meridians that run through our body, and within that they are attached. And when we get pain within our body, again, the first thing I do when I get a muscle ache within my body when I'm doing something, or I get tired and then something in me aches, I will actually sit and say, okay, is this my energy? And if it is, I will observe where those aches are. And there are maps. I will link one, actually. I've got a really good diagram that shows the places of pain throughout the body, left and right, and the usual emotions that go with that, because sometimes this is on such a subconscious level, it's on such a deep level, it's so embedded in us, we don't always know, we can't always tell. Now we have some ideas of how to identify the root causes of our resistance. Let's explore some of the activities that we can actually do to help us move from that space of resistance into a space of acceptance and growth. So the first activity, as always, is mindful meditation. Mindful meditation helps us become aware of our thoughts and our feelings without judgment, and it helps us to reduce that resistance, promoting that acceptance. So how to practice: find a quiet place to sit in, close your eyes, focus on your breath, and every time your mind wanders, just gently bring it back into focus onto the breath. Just focus on the breath. Tonglen is beautiful for this, because Tonglen not only has you focusing on the breath, but it brings the divine love in, and it allows us to, one, either give ourselves a beautiful loving hug, or we can pull in that procrastination, we can pull in that negative emotion that we've just identified, and we can start to dissolve it with love through our breath. Journaling, always. Journeying provides us with a safe space to explore and understand that resistance. Helps us to identify when we write it down. We don't always see it immediately, but if we have a practice of journaling, we can actually start to identify, we can start to see the patterns because we're documenting it. We can review what we've written over the past days, the past weeks, the past months, and we can start to highlight synchronicities within that. We can start to see the patterns and their associated emotions. So set aside time each day to write freely. I like to get into a meditative state and do what is called auto writing, so that it's coming from my higher self rather than my mind. The mind is extremely clever, and if we are in deep resistance, the mind will also be in that resistance, and we don't actually get to the nitty gritty of what we're looking at. So to do it in as auto writing in a meditative state is supremely helpful. And ask yourself the questions like, what am I resisting? Why am I feeling this way? Cognitive reconstructing. And cognitive reconstructing involves challenging those negative thought patterns and replacing them with more positive or realistic ones. And again, I have done a podcast on this with reframing. If you go back, listen to that, if you feel this is something you would like to learn, it is powerful, very, very powerful. And you do it in baby bite-sized pieces so that your body can become accustomed to the changes that you're making, rather than going, right, okay, this is what we do and now we're going to do this. What we actually do is we use little stepping stones, and we don't jump onto the next stepping stone until we, on a subconscious level, have reprogrammed the stage before. And so we do that innately, then we progress. And so we're really changing the mindset. We are changing the paradigms on a mental level. And you do that again, it's that introspective. Notice the negative or resistance thoughts and examine the evidence for and against those thoughts. What are you doing in that negative moment? And what would you like to do in that moment? So that you know where you're at, where you want to go. And then you take the time of, what am I going to be comfortable with in baby bite-sized pieces, steps? How am I? And as I said, there is a podcast on how to do that. Engaging in creative activities is wonderful. Creative activities like drawing, playing music, they help us to express and release resistance in a non-verbal way. When you think about the work that psychologists do with children and traumatic events, they will very often get them to draw what has occurred so that they don't have to express themselves. They can put it on paper through art. When you have autistic people, a lot of art therapy is used. Many of our emotions, when we do mandalas, for example, I love doing mandalas, especially when I'm working through something quite heavy or I'm really wanting to get a clarity and perspective on something, is to do mandalas, because you're going into a meditative state and you start to you basically pouring out what's on the inside onto paper. It doesn't have to be paper, it doesn't have to be art, but a creative project where you're pouring out those emotions. And don't analyze them whilst you're in the moment, but do take the time to be introspective and look at what you have produced, how you felt, what that meant. Physical movement is key. It's one of those that we don't do often enough, especially when we're having moments of resistance and procrastination when we're at work and we work in an office, for example. It's really important to just get up and move about. Release that stored tension, release that resistance, and choose an activity that you enjoy. Obviously, when you're at work, you can't do that. Very often, employment now is so strict that you can't even leave the office for 5 minutes without reporting why you're leaving the office. But when you're in your own environment, choose an activity that you enjoy. Choose a physical activity that you enjoy and incorporate that. Make it part of your routine. Make sure that you do that for enjoyment, not because you are working towards relieving your resistance and your procrastination, but you include it. It's about mindset. It's that inner dialogue. What are you telling yourself? Why are you saying that to yourself? So when you pick a physical activity that you enjoy, incorporate it into your routine because you want to, because you enjoy it. And be mindful, take note of how your body feels during and after that activity. Practice of gratitude. Obviously, most of these are key, and when we start doing these, so many different things fall into place. So gratitude shifts our focus from what's wrong to what's right, and that can help to reduce our resistance. I'm not going to tell you how to practice gratitude, because I would hope that we all know how to do that now. Visualization focuses our mind on positive outcomes. And again, just find a quiet place, close your eyes, imagine a situation where you feel no resistance. So you imagine, so that what I actually like to do is I like to in my visualization reframe the whole situation, and that helps me to identify the emotions, and it helps me to identify those stepping stones that I need to do when this occurs again. So I'm not beating myself up at the fact that I went into resistance and I fell into my old programs. What I'm actually doing is I use visualization and go, right, okay, that's what I did. How would I have liked that to look? How do I want that to look in the future? And so I go through the whole visualization as if I've done it the way that I want to do it, without resistance. And I'm observant of my thoughts, of my feelings, and my actions. And that helps me build up the framework needed for my reframing practice moving into the future. which takes us on to that self-compassion. And self-compassion exercises, don't underestimate them. Don't underestimate the power of loving yourself when you're doing something wrong, when you're in that resistance. And I stopped them because it's not wrong. We're just playing out patterns. It's not being your best version, not being the desired version, not being the person that you know on the inside that you can be on the outside. You're just in the process of learning how to do that and express that. So it's just loving. And again, being gentle. If you're being harsh with your inner dialogue, ask yourself, would you have said that to a dear friend? Would you have said that to your child? Would you have said that to your lover, your mother, your father? And if not, is it fair to be saying it to yourself? It's about being kind with ourselves. Not so kind that we let ourselves off the hook and we don't move forward, because that's just another form of procrastination, but being kind. Letter writing can be really good in this instance. Write yourself a letter. Dear me, I know I didn't do X, Y, and Z this time, and I'm sorry for that. I know I can do better, but I am going to give myself a pat on the back. I am going to give myself congratulations because this time I became consciously aware of that. And within that conscious awareness, I have identified X, Y, and Z. You're not saying you're there, so you're not got that, what can sometimes be that toxic positivity of pretending everything's great. Fake it till you make it. And fake it till you make it has its place, but we also, when it comes to procrastination, when it comes to resistance, it's not always the best way to go. It's about being real with ourselves, taking accountability and responsibility for the actions that we actually took in a kind, loving, compassionate way, and saying, okay, this is what I did. I apologize for that. And you're apologizing to yourself. You're not apologizing to anybody else. You don't have anything to apologize to anybody else for. You're apologizing to yourself because you weren't the best version of yourself in that moment. You know you can be and do better. And so you apologize for that. But you do it in a loving, compassionate way. And then you actually write to yourself, telling yourself, but thank you for that. Thank you for that moment of being less than all I can be, because it's allowed me to identify X, Y, and Z. It allowed me to bring it into the conscious mind so we can now actually do something about it. There's always duality. That is key when we're on this path, is to remember there's duality. So if for any reason or for whatever reason we're in that negative polarity, there is a positive polarity that sits right beside it. We just need to turn our heads and see it. Therapeutic techniques provide structured methods, proven structured methods to address resistance. So if you have deep resistance and you've tried some of the self-help aspects, the self-help modalities and tools, but you're still not able to move past it, seek outside help. Some people will go straight for seeking the outside help. Whatever feels and resonates and is right for you. But different therapeutic approaches will help you, will give you tools in your personal toolbox to assist you to move forward. Self-help books, online resources. There's podcasts like this. There are podcasts that psychologists do, and they will actually talk you through the steps. There are so many videos of how to. Just make sure if you're doing deep psychological work like this that you go to and watch reputable, qualified psychologists that talk you through the process. Connecting with nature. Do not underestimate. Nature nurtures. walking through the woods, walking through the park, taking your shoes off and just standing on your lawn will assist you, will bring in energies of nurturing, which will give you the strength and the fortification to keep doing the work that you need to do. And by incorporating these practices, you can start to move from a place of resistance to one of acceptance and growth and personal empowerment. Let me just remind you, it is a journey. Every step will bring you closer to that healing, to that wholeness, to that empowerment, to you being your authentic soul, sovereign self.